The blazing Arizona sun scorched the earth as Violet Daniels tugged at the frayed edges of her bonnet, desperately seeking relief from the merciless heat. 3 days of traveling had left her parched, weary, and questioning the wisdom of her decision to answer that marriage advertisement. But there was no turning back now, not when she had sold nearly everything she owned to purchase the stagecoach ticket west. The stagecoach had deposited her at the trading post with instructions to wait by the well outside town where her intended would meet her. That had been 4 hours ago. Violet's throat tightened with each passing minute. Had he changed his mind? Was this all an elaborate hoax? "Water's the most precious thing in these parts, miss," a gravelly voice called out, startling her from her thoughts. Violet turned to see a tall figure approaching on horseback, silhouetted against the setting sun. As he drew closer, she could make out his features' weathered skin that spoke of years under the harsh sun. A strong jawline partially hidden beneath several days' worth of stubble, and eyes as blue as the summer sky. "I'm not in the habit of talking to strangers," Violet replied, clutching her small carpetbag tighter. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion and removed his hat, revealing sandy brown hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Owen Jameson," he introduced himself with a slight bow. "And seeing as you're waiting by my well, I reckon we ought not be strangers." "Your well?" Violet's eyebrows shot up. "I was told to wait here for—" She stopped herself, suddenly embarrassed. Owen approached the well and began drawing up the bucket. "For Walter Peterson, I'm guessing." His voice held no judgment, only a hint of something that might have been disappointment. Violet's cheeks burned. "Yes, do you know him?" "Knew him." Owen handed her a ladle of cool water. "Walter passed on 3 months back. Pneumonia took him quick." The water Violet had just swallowed threatened to choke her. "But his letters, I received one just 6 weeks ago. His brother's been handling his affairs," Owen explained, leaning against the well. "Not surprised he kept writing. Walter was set on bringing a bride out here." Violet sank down onto her trunk, the full weight of her situation crashing down upon her. She was alone, in a strange territory, with no prospects and very little money. The year was 1875, and options for a woman alone were limited at best. "I suppose I'll need to find work in town," she said, more to herself than to Owen. Owen studied her for a long moment. "Town's 15 miles east. My ranch is just over that ridge," he gestured to the west. "I've got a spare room in the main house. You're welcome to stay until you sort things out." Violet eyed him suspiciously. "Why would you help a stranger?" "Because I've been stranded before," he said simply. "And nobody deserves to be left waiting beside a well in this heat." Against her better judgment, Violet accepted his offer. As they rode toward his ranch, her perched somewhat awkwardly in front of him on his horse, she wondered if she'd made another reckless decision. The ranch came into view as they crested a small hill. A sturdy 2-story house, several outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse. It wasn't grand, but it was well kept and clearly prosperous. "It's not much," Owen said, mistaking her silence for disappointment, "but it's mine, paid for in full last spring." "It's wonderful," Violet replied honestly. After growing up in a cramped Boston apartment, the open space and solid buildings seemed like a palace. A middle-aged woman emerged from the main house as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mrs. Holloway," Owen called out, "we have a guest." The woman's eyebrows shot up as she took in Violet's travel-worn appearance. "I'll prepare the spare room," she said, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "Mrs. Holloway is my housekeeper," Owen explained as he helped Violet down from the horse. "She comes up from town 3 times a week." "Pleased to meet you, madam," Violet said. Mrs. Holloway nodded. "Dinner will be ready in an hour, plenty of time for you to wash up." The spare room was simple but comfortable, with a bed, dresser, and washstand. Through the window, Violet could see workers in the corrals and beyond them, the vast expanse of the Arizona territory. For the first time since arriving, she allowed herself a moment of hope. Perhaps this mistake wasn't a disaster after all. Over dinner, Violet learned that Owen had come to Arizona 10 years earlier with nothing but determination and skill with horses. He'd worked as a ranch hand, saved his earnings, and eventually purchased this land. Now, at 32, he ran one of the most successful horse breeding operations in the territory. "And you, Miss Daniels?" Owen asked. "What brought you west, beyond the obvious?" Violet pushed her beans around her plate. "There wasn't much left for me in Boston. My parents passed 3 years ago. I worked as a seamstress, but the factory closed." She left out the part about the factory owner's son and his unwanted advances. "Walter's advertisement promised a good life out west." "Walter was a decent man," Owen acknowledged. "Would have treated you right." Days stretched into weeks, and Violet found herself settling into life at the ranch. She helped Mrs. Holloway with household duties and put her sewing skills to use mending work clothes for the ranch hands. Owen taught her to ride properly, laughing good-naturedly at her initial fear of the gentle mare he'd selected for her. "She can sense your fear," he explained, placing his hand over hers on the reins. "You have to show her you're in command." The warmth of his hand and the intensity in his eyes when he spoke made Violet's heart flutter in a way she hadn't expected. One evening, nearly a month after her arrival, Owen found Violet on the porch, staring at the sunset. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he asked, leaning against the railing beside her. Violet nodded. "I never saw colors like this in Boston." "Have you thought about what you want to do?" Owen's question hung in the air. "Mrs. Holloway mentioned the dressmaker in town is looking for someone with skill." Violet felt a pang of disappointment. Was he eager for her to leave? "I have been considering my options," she admitted. "There's also another option," Owen said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "You could stay here, permanently," Violet's breath caught, "as your housekeeper." Owen turned to face her. "As my wife, Violet." The directness of his proposal startled her. "Owen, I know it's sudden," he interrupted, "and I know you came out here expecting someone else, but these past weeks, I've come to care for you deeply." His eyes, usually confident, now held a vulnerability that touched her. "You barely know me," Violet protested weakly. "I know enough," Owen countered. "I know you're kind, hardworking, and braver than you give yourself credit for. I know my heart feels fuller when you're around." He took her hand. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight, just think about it." That night, sleep eluded Violet. She had come west expecting to marry a stranger, so why was Owen's proposal so unsettling? Because she realized with startling clarity her feelings for him were real. This wasn't a practical arrangement, this was her heart involved. The next morning, Violet rode into town with Mrs. Holloway. She needed perspective away from Owen's presence. The town of Copper Springs was small but growing, with a main street lined with businesses. Mrs. Holloway introduced her to the dressmaker, a friendly woman named Mrs. Parker, who offered Violet a position on the spot. "Think about it," Mrs. Parker said. "I could use someone with proper training." As they were leaving the shop, a commotion down the street caught their attention. A group of men on horseback were making their way through town, led by a distinguished-looking gentleman in an expensive suit. "That's Harrison Peterson," Mrs. Holloway whispered. "Walter's brother, the one who kept writing to you." Violet froze. She had almost forgotten about the letters, about why she had come west in the first place. Harrison spotted them and tipped his hat. "Mrs. Holloway," he greeted, then turned his attention to Violet. "And you must be Miss Daniels. I'd recognize you from Walter's description." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've been looking for you." "I'm staying at the Jameson Ranch," Violet explained, uncomfortable under his scrutiny. "Yes, I heard." His tone suggested he didn't approve. "I assumed you'd be in town. I've been handling my brother's affairs, as you know." Mrs. Holloway excused herself to finish her shopping, leaving Violet alone with Harrison. "I was surprised to continue receiving letters after your brother's passing," Violet said. Harrison had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "A regrettable oversight. I was handling so many of Walter's matters, but now that you're here we should discuss your situation." Violet bristled at his presumption. "My situation is quite satisfactory, Mr. Peterson." "Is it?" His eyebrows rose. A single woman living at a bachelor's ranch. That's hardly proper, Miss Daniels. I have employment opportunities in town, Violet countered. Harrison leaned closer. My brother wanted to provide for you. His property is substantial. As his intended, you have certain claims. Violet stepped back. I was never legally bound to your brother, Mr. Peterson. Our arrangement was contingent on meeting and mutual agreement. Nevertheless, Harrison persisted, I feel responsible. Perhaps we could come to an arrangement. The suggestion in his voice made Violet's skin crawl. I don't believe that will be necessary. Good day, Mr. Peterson. As she walked away, she could feel his eyes following her. Something about Harrison Peterson troubled her deeply. When Violet returned to the ranch, she found Owen in the stable, examining a horse's hoof. He straightened when he saw her, concern evident in his features. You met Harrison, he stated rather than asked. Violet nodded. News travels fast. It's a small territory, Owen replied. What did he want? He implied I might have some claim to Walter's property. She hesitated. And suggested we might come to an arrangement. Owen's jaw tightened. Harrison's been eyeing Walter's land for years. The ranch borders his mine operation. Having you show up probably threw a wrench in whatever he was planning. He seemed to take issue with my staying here, Violet added. Harrison's all about appearances, Owen said dismissively. But be careful around him. He doesn't take no for an answer easily. That evening, Violet and Owen sat on the porch swing, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The day's encounter had clarified something for Violet. I've been thinking about your proposal, she said quietly. Owen turned to her, careful to keep his expression neutral. And I came west looking for security, Violet began. A practical arrangement, but I realize now that I want more than that. She gathered her courage. I want love, Owen. Real love. Owen's face fell slightly. I understand. No, you don't, Violet said, reaching for his hand. What I'm saying is that I think I could find that with you, not immediately, perhaps, but in time. Hope dawned in Owen's eyes. Are you accepting my proposal? I'm saying I'd like to court properly first, Violet clarified. Get to know each other better before making such a commitment. Owen's smile was radiant. I can court, he assured her. I can court better than any man in the territory. True to his word, Owen set about courting Violet with a determination that both amused and touched her. He brought wildflowers from his rides, took her on picnics by the stream that ran through his property, and even arranged for them to attend a dance in town. At the dance, held in the newly built town hall, Owen proudly introduced Violet to everyone as Miss Daniels, who's considering becoming Mrs. Jameson. His openness about his intentions both embarrassed and pleased her. As they were dancing, Violet spotted Harrison Peterson watching them from across the room. His expression was calculating, and a chill ran down her spine. Don't mind him, Owen whispered, noticing her distraction. Harrison's always plotting something. But Harrison's interest became more concerning in the following weeks. He appeared at the ranch on business pretexts, always finding reasons to speak with Violet alone. Each time, he hinted at the precariousness of her position and offered solutions that invariably involved her leaving Owen's ranch. After one such visit, Owen found Violet upset in the garden. What did he say to you? Owen demanded, his normally gentle demeanor hardening. He suggested that you're only interested in me because of the water rights that come with Walter's property, Violet admitted. That you knew I was coming and arranged to find me at the well that day. Owen's face flushed with anger. That's absurd. I had no idea you existed until I saw you sitting there. I know, Violet assured him, but he's very convincing, Owen. And he mentioned something about having documents proving Walter's intent to marry me, which could complicate your land claim near the stream. Owen ran a hand through his hair in frustration. This isn't about water rights or land claims. Harrison's trying to pressure you because he wants Walter's property, and having Walter's intended bride complicates his claim. He took her hands. Violet, I need to tell you something I should have mentioned earlier. Walter and I were partners. We owned adjacent properties and shared water rights. When he died without heirs, his will left his share to me, but only if he died unmarried. Violet pulled away. So there is a financial interest. No, Owen said firmly. Harrison is twisting things. Yes, I inherit Walter's share, but I would have even if you had married Walter. The clause was about Walter dying unmarried, not about preventing his marriage. Then why does Harrison care so much about my presence? Because Harrison contested the will, claiming Walter intended to marry and have heirs. If he can prove Walter had a binding agreement with you, he might convince a judge that Walter's intent was to have heirs who would inherit. The situation was more complicated than Violet had imagined. What should we do? First, Owen said, we need to see these supposed documents. Then we talked to Judge Everett. He's fair and he knew Walter well. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 2 days later, Harrison arrived at the ranch with the town sheriff. Miss Daniels, Harrison called out as they dismounted. I've brought Sheriff Collins to discuss a legal matter concerning you. Violet and Owen met them on the porch, standing united. What's this about, Harrison? Owen asked. Harrison produced a folded document. This is a contract of marriage between my brother and Miss Daniels. It's dated and signed by Walter with a space for Miss Daniels' signature upon arrival. Violet frowned. I never agreed to sign any contract sight unseen. Nevertheless, Harrison continued, it establishes my brother's intent. And as his next of kin, I'm here to honor his wishes by offering Miss Daniels her rightful place on my brother's property, which I am now managing. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. Mr. Peterson asked me to witness this exchange officially. Owen examined the document. This isn't Walter's signature, he said flatly. I've seen enough of his handwriting to know. Harrison's smile tightened. Are you accusing me of forgery, Jameson? I'm stating a fact, Owen replied evenly, and I think the judge will agree when he sees it. The confrontation might have escalated further if not for the timely arrival of Mrs. Holloway, who brought with her an elderly man known to everyone as Doc Sanders. I heard what's happening, Doc Sanders said, approaching the group. And I think I can settle this matter. He turned to Violet. Miss Daniels, I treated Walter in his final days. He spoke of you often, excited about your arrival, but he was also realistic about his condition. The old doctor produced a letter from his pocket. He asked me to give this to you if you arrived after his passing. I've been holding it, waiting for the right moment. Violet took the letter with trembling hands and read it silently. Read it aloud, Harrison demanded. Violet looked to Owen, who nodded encouragingly. My dear Miss Daniels, she began. If you are reading this, then I have not survived to welcome you to Arizona. I apologize for the circumstances, but I want you to know that I was sincere in my desire to provide you with a good home. Should you choose to stay in Copper Springs, my property is yours to use as you see fit for 1 year, after which time the ownership shall revert to my business partner, Owen Jameson, as per our agreement. Owen is a good man, the best I've known, and I trust him to treat you fairly. I release you from any obligation to me and wish you happiness in whatever path you choose. Sincerely, Walter Peterson. Harrison's face contorted with rage. This is preposterous. That letter is clearly a fabrication. It's dated and witnessed by myself and Reverend Mitchell, Doc Sanders said calmly. The judge has a copy in his records, filed the day after Walter died. The sheriff cleared his throat. Seems pretty clear to me, Mr. Peterson. The lady has no obligation to you or your brother's estate. Harrison stormed off, his plans thwarted, but not before giving Violet and Owen a look that promised this wasn't over. That evening, Owen and Violet sat by the fireplace, processing the day's events. Walter was a good friend, Owen said softly. He would have made you a good husband. Violet touched his arm gently. I believe that, but I'm grateful for how things turned out even with all the complications. Owen took her hand. Violet, I need to be clear about something. I don't care about Walter's property or water rights. I care about you. If you wanted to claim that year on his land, I'd support you completely. I know, Violet said, and she did know. Over these months she had come to understand Owen's character, his integrity, his kindness, his unwavering reliability. But I don't want Walter's land, I want to stay here, with you. Owen's eyes lit up. Does that mean? It means, Violet said, gathering her courage, that I love you, Owen Jameson, and if your proposal still stands, my answer is yes. Owen pulled her into his arms. It definitely still stands. They were married 3 weeks later in the town church, with Mrs. Holloway crying happily in the front pew and Doc Sanders giving the bride away. Even the sheriff attended, ensuring that Harrison Peterson kept his distance. Their wedding night was everything Violet had dreamed of: tender, passionate, and filled with whispered promises for their future. As she lay in Owen's arms afterward, she marveled at how differently her journey west had turned out from what she'd planned, having regrets. Owen asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. Violet shook her head. Just thinking about fate, if Walter hadn't passed away, if you hadn't found me at the well that day. Owen traced her cheek with his finger. I believe some things are meant to be, Violet. You were meant to wait beside that well, and I was meant to draw water that day. The years that followed proved Owen right. Harrison Peterson eventually left the territory after his mining operation failed, removing the shadow from their happiness. The ranch prospered under their joint care, with Violet establishing a breeding program for carriage horses that became renowned throughout the territory. Their family grew too. Their first child, a daughter named Eleanor, arrived a year after their wedding. She was joined 2 years later by a son, Benjamin, and eventually by twin boys who kept the entire household on their toes. By 1895, 20 years after Violet had first arrived in Arizona, the Jameson Ranch had grown into one of the most successful operations in the now established state. The original well where they had met became a special place for their family, marked by a stone engraving that read, "Where two lives merged into one." On their 20th anniversary, Owen took Violet back to that well at sunset. Both were older now, with silver threading through Owen's sandy hair and laugh lines around Violet's eyes. But the love between them had only deepened with time. 20 years ago, Owen said, drawing up a bucket of water just as he had that first day, I found the most precious thing in Arizona waiting by this well. Violet smiled, accepting the ladle he offered. And I found the man I didn't know I was looking for. As they stood together watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Violet reflected on all they had built together. From that moment of uncertainty beside the well to this life filled with love, family, and purpose, it had been a journey worth every step. What are you thinking about, Mrs. Jameson? Owen asked, wrapping his arm around her waist. Our future, Violet replied, leaning into his embrace. And how it all began with a bride who waited beside a well, a cowboy who drew water and the promise of tomorrow.